314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is getting hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire training of constantly having to rack the slide to reset the trigger. With this thing, all you do is clear your weapon, load the training magazine, and get to work. Check them out at dryfiremag.com.
So today I'm going to do a solo overview of the 2008 Mumbai attacks. And like a lot of these debriefs or case studies that we do, I'm going to kind of keep it general. These are not intended to be comprehensive case studies necessarily. And what I mean by that is I'm trying to, in an hour or so, condense an overview of the attacks so that you understand what they were about and kind of generally what happened and a couple of insights maybe. And then if you want to deep dive it, you can deep dive it. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more comprehensive than if you just went and scrolled through Google for 5 or 10 minutes, but it's not intended to be the source, right? So I encourage you to go look. There's a lot of material on this. There is apparently a BBC documentary about it that's supposedly pretty good. I haven't watched it, but I've heard good things about it. So that's kind of where we're at. I just want to scope this a little bit, but the idea is to just give you a basic overview and understanding so you can apply it so that you've heard of it before, right? And you know kind of the big takeaways or the big bullet points. Now, I don't have a whole lot of tactical insight to take away from this because it was such a complex and sophisticated event or series of events. And when we talk about active killer or active shooter incidents, it's really those are pretty simple. They're chaotic and there's a lot to them, but they're pretty simple, right? They're pretty simple to manage. Close with kill the bad guy, stop the killing, stop the dying, and it could be a mess, but really the management of them and the preparation for them is there's not a lot to it, right? I mean, you could try to gain the intelligence to maybe stifle an attack before it occurs, but you don't always get a say in that. And the reason that I'm bringing this attack up is we recently did a debrief on the Las Vegas Mandalay Bay shooting, the 1 October Country Music Festival attack. And if you haven't seen that episode yet, we have the audio version up on the podcast like normal, but we also have video on our YouTube under our handle. We're not all in on YouTube yet, but we do have video of this particular interview. Is with Sergeant Ashton Pack, who has a counterterrorism background and was a patrol supervisor the night of the attack, and also with retired Lieutenant Will Hudler, who was the SWAT commander on the night of. And Will works with Brink Drones, who's one of our proud sponsors here, and they were kind enough to sit down with us and share a lot of insights. It's a long interview, but there is so much to take away from that attack. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen or heard that yet, to go check it out. But one of the things that came up in that discussion was Sergeant Pack was several miles away from where this thing was going on in Las Vegas. And he has a counterterrorism background. He spent a lot of his career doing that kind of work. And something that crossed his mind was this type of attack. He knew that him and his guys, his patrol shift was not in a position to effectively stop or deal with that attack in the initial reports of it. And so he kept some of them in reserve, anticipating the possibility of this sort of incident. And I think that's a very insightful and strategic level decision. It's not something you take lightly because obviously everyone wants to wants to go get after it, right? They want to, run to the scene and be part of the solution to that, which is great. But knowing how far away you are and knowing that these attackers will often target first responders with a secondary attack, and everyone will congregate in this one place, this one epicenter, that doesn't set us up well to manage something like Mumbai. And so, although it's kind of the anomaly for most active killer events certainly around the country and perhaps around the world, this one is less common, less frequent. It is still something to keep in the back of your head. And that's why I think this is a good one to deep dive and just kind of understand a little bit about. And in this case, maybe if you know that it's you're far away and there's a lot of resources rushing to that epicenter, that scene, you could stage some sort of mobile crisis team or quick reaction force outside of the middle of it to just be prepared for it. Now, that's not the initial response, right? The initial response is you need to get there, close with, and kill the bad guy, right? There's no, in an active killer event, I don't want to mince any words about what the priorities are. But as that thing trickles down and officers start getting on scene and they start dealing with those immediate threats and you start dealing with medical care and stuff like that, it might be a good idea for someone to pipe up and think about, hey, okay, now I want to take a group of guys, right? Like a small team of guys and or girls or whatever, like have a small team or medium-sized team if you have the resources, and set them aside, right, to be mobile and range out a little bit and kind of just detach from the chaos that's unfolding right there. It's just something to think about. The other place that this can apply is if you work in one. Often these become multi-agency responses, right? You have city cops, sheriff's department cops, neighboring agencies, and maybe one of those outlying agencies. This is the sort of thing that you think about, where hey, the Las Vegas Metro guys are dealing with this in the middle of it. If you're that Henderson or North Las Vegas crew, maybe you're thinking about like, hey, why don't we set up a team of guys in case there's a secondary attack or something like this kicks off. Again, just ideas, easier said than done, right? But I want to just kind of plant that seed, and it's why I want to deep dive this attack. So these started on the evening of November 26th, 2008, and it consisted of 10 terrorists who were associated with a group called Lashkar-e-Taiba, and they were a Pakistani terrorist group that there's a lot of evidence and speculation that suggests that these guys are actually backed by the Pakistani government in some way, and we'll talk about that at the end. But this is a well-funded, well-organized group. This was not their first attack. In fact, it was not the first series of attacks that hit Mumbai. So Mumbai in India is a major city. And in 1993, they had a similar type of thing where several areas were hit. So it's not the first time this sort of thing has happened. And Mumbai actually has a mobile anti-terrorism squad set up to kind of deal with this sort of thing. So Lashkar-e-Taiba, or LET, as you might hear me say it throughout the rest of this, was the name of this group. It was 10 terrorists who were recruited for this, and they went through this sort of selection and training process where people were whittled down and weeded out along the way. They started with like a basic training course, and then some guys went into another selection where they learned some additional tradecraft and explosives training and higher level advanced skills. And then they went into, what you might equate to like a special operations, special training course selection where more people were whittled down. So this started with, a couple dozen people or so, and was eventually whittled down to these 10 terrorists who were chosen for this operation. And the idea where I'm going with this is something that was planned long-term, and it was rehearsed and conducted in a way that they had an operations center back in Pakistan that was able to provide insight over cell phone and satellite phones and stuff. I mean, this was like a long time coming, right? And once something like this gets at that level of momentum, it can be pretty hard to, when these guys are that sophisticated, you can become very reactive. Now, there were some warnings. There was a point where the U.S. intelligence community and I think another country's intelligence community warned of a possible attack, an impending attack at the Taj Mahal Motel in Mumbai, which was one of the several targets. And they stepped up security for a period of time, and then nothing happened, and they kind of backed off. And it was, I don't know, the following month, I think, that this happened. So again, something with this level of planning and momentum is tough, right? So the night of 26 November, or I guess earlier in the day, but the attacks kicked off at night. But earlier that day, they sail from Pakistan via boat to the waters of India, where they hijack an Indian boat and they kill most of the crew. They have the captain still left to take them to a place of their choosing in India, in the waters of India off the shore. They eventually killed the captain of that ship as well. And once they were about 4 miles from shore, they jumped in these inflatable boats and headed to the coast. So these 10 guys were equipped with AK-47s. They had pistols. They had hand grenades. Again, a lot of resources went into this. This was not a just kind of this basic lone wolf type of attack. This was a well-equipped thing. So they take these boats. They go to the course. They drop 6 of the guys off. Those guys start headed in to deal with their assignments, and then they run up the coast a short distance to another spot, and the remaining 4 get out of the boat. They split off into twos, go their separate directions, and at both of those locations there were some locals that were like, "Hey, who are you guys? What are you doing here? Are you know?" And they just kind of blew them off. One of them said, "Oh, we're just students," and one of them said, "Mind your own business." And at one point, I guess there was a call to authorities about something that looks suspicious, but nothing really happened. So these 10 guys ultimately split off and go into their separate little cells. And the initial one of the first parts of this attack was at a cafe where 2 of these dudes went and just shot the place up. They killed 10 people. They wounded several others. They planted some bombs in some taxi cabs. And when those things, they were set on a timer. When those bombs went off, it killed another 5 people and wounded 15 more. 4 of the attackers went to the Taj Mahal Hotel, which I mentioned earlier. 2 more went to, I'm going to butcher the name of this place, but Oberoi Trident Hotel. Again, I don't know, another hotel in Mumbai. 2 of them went there. And then there was a place called the Nariman House, which was like a Jewish community center. 2 more attackers went there. So that accounts for 8 of the 10, right? Went to those 3 locations. We're going to come back to those. The other 2, I mentioned there was this initial attack that happened at this cafe, and it was just kind of a storefront. They shot through the windows, that sort of thing. Initial kind of chaos and response to all of this. And these 2 guys they take a taxi to a railway station, like a, big metro station. And that attack involved the AK-47s. Several hand grenades were thrown, and at that attack about 58 people were killed, 104 were wounded. So this was like the big kickoff of this thing, right? This anti-terrorism squad that I mentioned is a thing that they have start responding as this railway attack is occurring, and the 2 dudes had left the scene, so they're playing catch up, right? They're trying to catch up to these guys and turn into like this manhunting thing. The 2 attackers go towards a hospital, which was one of their intended targets, but at this point, word was getting out that these 2 attacks had already occurred, and they locked the hospital down. So there were some shots fired. They didn't get into the hospital like they wanted to. They wanted to go kill patients there, but that didn't happen. There was a confrontation by the authorities outside. There's a little bit of a chase. The cops get outgunned. Ultimately, the attackers take the vehicle that the cops are in, and ultimately, when they take off, they try to carjack another car, and there's a roadblock that gets set up at one point where another confrontation occurs. During that confrontation, one of the attackers is killed, and the other one was arrested and captured after a hell of a fight. Right? I mean, this was a hands-on, entangled gunfight kind of thing where at least one officer was killed, and they literally had to wrestle the gun out of this guy's hands and ultimately arrested him. Now, that was the only arrest made in this case. All the other attackers, the remaining 9, were all killed at the end of this thing. And that guy revealed some intelligence and made some admissions and things like that, and ultimately faced trial, and he was hanged, I think, in 2012. So, within 4 years or so after the attack. This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. So that was kind of the beginnings of this, right? Now, this thing from 26 November continued on for a couple of days, but the initial part of it was the cafe, the railway station, and then the initial parts of those 2 hotels and the Jewish Center getting taken over. But those 3 locations, the 2 hotels and the Jewish Center, took another day or 2 to resolve. So obviously, this is already chaotic, right? There's already 5 locations that have been hit at this point, 6 if you count a little bit going on in front of the hospital. And the bulk of this is still left to be dealt with, because these hotels are obviously big, large, populated places. The Jewish Center has a bunch of people inside, and they took these over in like a hostage kind of scenario. And obviously their goal was to kill as many people as possible. They weren't, they were trying to get the media attention to sensationalize it, I guess. But the goal was not to, negotiate for anything and try to get, like, give me $1 million and a helicopter right out of here. Like, no, it's not. They were obviously intending on making this thing an event and try to kill as many people as possible. So the 4 attackers that went to the Taj Mahal Hotel on the first night, they went in there about 11 p.m. They start with, shooting a bunch of people. There's an explosion. There's a fire that happens. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. The fire as a weapon is a huge topic on its own. Now, I think this initial fire was probably just incidental from the explosion, but there was a point later on, which I'll talk about, where they intentionally set some fires. And this has been a hot topic, at least around, my parts for a little while here, where consider how difficult that is. It's not like you can, if an attack is going on and the scene isn't safe, how do you bring in firefighters to deal with the fire, right? Like there's this balancing act where, you're just going to get more people killed by bringing them in. And, it's just not an easy problem to deal with. Like it's a tough, sticky, dirty problem, right? Fire being used as a weapon, or fire even just incidentally occurring during something like this. So pretty early in the morning hours of the 27th, so the following day, basically by midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, they have the Taj Mahal Hotel surrounded, and people are military trucks and commandos and stuff are starting to show up. The fire got mostly managed. They'd been evacuating people along the way where they could, and they ultimately learned that the terrorists were holed up with some hostages deep in the hotel. And after some time, they're able to get organized, and they go storm the castle looking for these dudes. There was lots of shots fired. More grenades are thrown by the terrorists. People get evacuated along the way where they could be, and eventually this fire was deliberately set by the terrorists, right? So we have to deal with that problem. And it wasn't until about 4 a.m. the next morning, this is all going on over that, day, that entire day, basically. It wasn't until the next morning that they initially said, like, okay, we got our guy, the hotel's clear, it's all over with. But then a little while later, they determined, like, nope, there's still more bad guys, right? There's still more people outstanding. So by about 8 o'clock the next morning, another 4 hours go by, they're a little bit more certain. They're like, hey, we're still clearing the hotel, but we're confident now we have everybody, and we're going to call this under control, right? So that was the Taj Mahal incident. Now I am breezing over a lot of the detail, but I just want you to think about, like, this was going on for, a day and change, basically, a little over 24 hours. So again, starting at about 11 p.m. the night before. So that was the first hotel, the Taj Mahal. The Oberoi Trident, I don't know how to say that word, I'm sorry. That was another hotel, 2 guys who went there. The attack unfolded much the same way. There were hostages taken, shots fired, explosions. Some people were rescued. There was a fire. Very similar sort of thing. Takes a long time to manage. And ultimately, at the end of that, some commandos assault the place, and the two terrorists are shot and killed after a big gunfight. The last big one was this Jewish center. And this one was, again, there were communications being intercepted at this point by government personnel, and they were learning that they were getting intelligence and advice and encouragement from someone back in Pakistan, right? So they had these handlers and a little operations center set up where they were watching the news and seeing what was unfolding and communicating with these guys. And one of the things that was said was that, like, a Jew's life is worth like that of 50 other lives, right? So they took this Jewish center and the people there hostage. And so the theory was like, hey, they're just going to kill these people. Like, they're saying that they're worth more than, regular people being killed or whatever. And again, just part of that whole Islamic extremism kind of terror attack. So when they finally get organized and on the initial parts of this, they're evacuating buildings, they're containing these guys. There's some shots that are fired. One of the terrorists gets wounded, and ultimately that place gets assaulted as well, right? So there was a group of hostages that were rescued at one point of the operation, but at the point that the actual assault occurred, the remaining hostages were found all having been killed, and there was evidence that they had also been tortured, right? So again, pretty heinous, pretty ugly, pretty nasty, but again, another big gunfight occurs there, and the 2 terrorists there are ultimately killed. So in a nutshell, I know I really just kind of blasted through that. That's the attack, right? Or the series of attacks. So you had the cafe, you had the stuff at the hospital and the railway center, the metro station. You had the gunfights that occurred at the roadblock and with the guys that were chasing them. You had the 2 hotels and the Jewish center, again, across this city. I mean, that's a major undertaking to try to manage all of those things at once. There was a lot of government agencies involved in the response to that. They had their military people and their counterterrorism people, and obviously the local authorities and stuff like that at various points. But that was, in a nutshell, I mean, if you just wrap your head around that, that's basically what you need to know about the Mumbai attacks as an overview. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Pakistani influence. I told you that there was a lot of open source intelligence that points to the possibility of LET being backed somehow by the Pakistani government. And from what I've read, at the very least, we know that leaders of the terrorist organization had ties to people in the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, and some of their military leaders. Now, whether those were official connections or just people that made their way into those ranks that, had an in, I don't know. Or, again, if it was official government, backing, but obviously some of that we're not going to hear about. One, it's probably not open source, whatever we do know on that. And 2, getting anyone to admit it would be tough. I know with enough pressure from other governments, including the United States, Pakistani government ultimately went and arrested some people, or at least claimed to do an investigation and arrest some people and do some raids and that sort of thing. But some of it just kind of fell flat, and they weren't super cooperative with the Indian government in terms of investigating this whole thing. And the takeaway, I guess, in all of that, I don't really have much narrative or editorial on it other than just to say that, understand the lines get blurry when it comes to our enemies and our adversaries out there. And so you have to be skeptical about the things that you read on the news and that sort of thing, and understand that there is money and resources and logistics and all kinds of stuff out there to support people who want to do us harm with, really not a lot of, it doesn't take much, right? Like a few AK-47s and some hand grenades is not, if you think about the infrastructure of the U.S. military, for example, or most other of our ally militaries, that's not a lot of gear, right? And all they need is a way to sneak in and sneak out and get to their targets. You have 10 committed guys and you can wreak a lot of havoc. And so it's just something to think about. Like, yes, a lot of planning went into this. It was very sophisticated, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that hard to pull off. So you just, food for thought. There's people out there that are unfriendly to our way of life and will probably backdoor some stuff like that to harm us. Right. In terms of ways the U.S. was involved, obviously there was that point where we warned of a possible attack like the month prior. I don't know how much information or details or confidence they had in that, but obviously that intel was accurate. Even though it might not have been complete at that point, there were certainly some signs. There was a Pakistani American who was arrested and charged, connected to this incident. This was a guy from Chicago who apparently helped in the planning of the operation and did some reconnaissance for them of the targets in Mumbai. And I'm not going to deep dive him here, but the point that I want to, the thing I want to point out here is we have plenty of those unfriendly people that I talked about. There's plenty of them living in our midst. And so, yes, this was on the other side of the world, happened in India. Things are different there, but we shouldn't ever get too complacent and think that it couldn't happen here, right? Because there's people like this who live among us. So be suspicious. If you see something, say something. And remember that if you only have something that looks a little bit suspicious, it might just be one piece of the puzzle, right? And people might be putting other pieces together that you just don't know about. And so it's just better to report that stuff if it looks suspicious or off or whatever. You never know. So, again, blasting through this, that is the basic rundown of the Mumbai attacks. The key things here are, I mentioned how sophisticated and elaborate and well planned this was, but I also mentioned that, it's really not in the grand, like consider the US raid in Pakistan where Osama bin Laden was killed. That was a much bigger undertaking. Right. And we did it. So, think about the both invasions into Iraq. Invading a country is a lot more complicated than something like this. So, yeah, it's well planned. It was well rehearsed. It was elaborate. It was sophisticated. It was certainly more than just your lone wolf active killer event. But, a handful of people and a handful of weapons, you can wreak a lot of havoc. So don't think that it's too far, too big of a stretch. Right. All in all, 175 people were killed in this event, and that's including 9 of the 10 terrorists. Hundreds more were wounded. And from a practical standpoint, again, I just want you to think about how difficult this thing could be to counter when all of your resources are converging on the first incident, the first set of shots fired, and then another one breaks out, and then a hotel gets taken over, and another hotel gets taken over, and another building gets taken over. Like where we go from here is I just want you to think about how much more sophisticated the next one can be, right? This wasn't a nation state carrying out some big coordinated campaign against us, invading a country like we talked about. I know we talk about the Pakistani government involvement possibility, but this is not the same, right? It's not the same kind of thing. And The next one could be much worse. So just wrap your head around that, mentally prepare for whatever that next level might look like in terms of complicated and well thought out. And one of the things that comes to my mind in terms of how we manage or mitigate something like this, not so much on the prevention side, proactively, sure, there's the whole intelligence side of it that if you can get left of bang, so to speak, that would be great, right? But from a management perspective, when it goes down, when this thing actually kicks off and yet now you're responding to it, is to focus on the principles, right? There's really no way, like, your resources are going to be overrun and you're going to need help. There's nothing really like you can do about that. So you have to focus on the principles of the individual attacks and incidents as they are. So have things like some insight on, from the frontline level up, who's going to get involved, what phone calls are going to get made, who's going to show up, how long is it going to take. We have a general understanding of how we manage active killer incidents, right? Rescue task force, close with kill the bad guy, rescue task force, all of that is established. It's not pretty. It doesn't happen smoothly, but those principles are there. The protocol is there. We know how to deal with barricaded hostage situations as in general, how to contain and isolate and evacuate and negotiate when that's appropriate, but also something we've talked about in the past, which is the doomed captives doctrine, right? Where these guys are not looking to negotiate. They're just looking to make a statement. And in situations like that, typically you want to go respond and assault and try to rescue as many people as you can before they have a chance to fortify and plan against you, right? So like that doomed captives doctrine is something that you have to think about in the context of these hostage situations when that starts happening. Wrap your head around the use of fire as a weapon. Don't get so wrapped up in active killer when it comes to active shooter. We've talked about this. I mean, people use knives, they use cars into crowds, and fire as a weapon is a big one, like I said, but also things like guys start throwing grenades. I mean, that's something that most law enforcement, do you know what cover and concealment looks like when you're dealing with hand grenades and explosives? That's a whole other problem, right? So maybe you need to start looking into those things and tie that into your training and your just general awareness and understanding. So what that gets you is when you become entirely reactive and it's just chaotic, which is how it's going to be. A situation like this, that's just how it's going to be. You have some catalog, right? You have a catalog of solutions to work with, and you don't get too bogged down just trying to figure out, how to deal with any one part of it. Because as individuals, I mean, sure, we want a coordinated response, but as individuals, you're going to have your own role in this, and you're only going to be, you're one guy, or you're one team or one unit or one group of cops that go to, one incident, or one group of firefighters that go to one incident. And you can only do kind of that the sphere of your control, right? You have to consider what are the positive impacts I can have here right now? I mean, sure, we need bosses and leaders and commanders who are thinking at that strategic level of how am I going to manage all these resources and get more help. That's that guy's sphere of influence, right? If you're a commander, you need to be thinking about okay, I'm going to have cops going to these scenes. They're going to do their thing. I'm going to prepare and equip them accordingly. But now I need to think about what are the next, who am I going to call for help, right? And that's your sphere of influence. So consider where you're going to be in something like this, so you don't get too bogged down. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's really all I have on Mumbai. I tried to keep this one short because it's so complex and because it's so rare to see something like this. It's not unheard of, but it does not happen as often to have a series of attacks be this well coordinated. But I want to keep it short so that you have the basic overview. There's a ton more to learn if you're interested. You could start at the Wikipedia page, go down to the bottom and look at the reference material and start clicking through that. And of course, if you have questions or ideas or anything like that, you can reach out to us, or you can bring them up in the podcast discussion group we got going on Facebook, and we can try to explore that and see where we can take it from there. Maybe do some follow-up if anyone's got some insights. But I encourage you, if you haven't already, go check out the Las Vegas debrief. Again, this case study comes up, which is why I wanted to do something real quick to hit it. And take a listen. Again, that one is a much longer deep dive, but there's a whole lot more insight here than what I've got on Mumbai. Again, not a lot to take away, just understanding how crazy this thing was. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you get something out of this, and hopefully there's some lesson in here that will influence your next layer of preparation and training. So good luck. This episode is brought to you by Right-On Optics. Right-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rightonoptics.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching, and you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.